Gallery experience. Who decides what is good art? Have you ever stood in front of a painting and thought, "That's amazing," and then looked at the label and discovered that someone else thinks it is a masterpiece, while you don't understand it at all? Or maybe the opposite happened. You loved a painting, but everyone around you seemed to ignore it. So who decides what is good art? The artist? The museum? The critics? The collectors? The art market? Or you? This is one of the most fascinating questions in the art world, because there is no universal measuring system for art. We can measure the size of a painting. We can identify the materials. We can study the technique. We can research the artist. But we cannot put a machine next to a painting and receive a score saying, "Good art, 94%. Art doesn't work that way, and that is exactly what makes the subject so complicated. Let's begin with the artist. Artists themselves have ideas about what makes their work successful. They may care about technique. Some care about emotion. Some care about originality. Some care about ideas. Some care about beauty. Others deliberately reject beauty. An artist might spend years developing a particular style. They may believe that breaking traditional rules is more important than following them. But does the artist get the final vote? Not necessarily. Once the artwork leaves the studio, other people begin interpreting it. Critics may write about it. Curators may exhibit it. Collectors may buy it. Museums may acquire it. Students may study it. And audiences may love it or hate it. All of these reactions become part of the artwork story. Now think about museums. Museums have enormous influence. When a museum places an artwork on its walls, it is telling visitors, "This work is important enough for you to spend time looking at it." That doesn't necessarily mean the museum is saying, "You must like this." It means, "This artwork is worth considering." But museums also make choices. They cannot display everything. There are millions of artworks in the world. A museum has limited space, so curators must decide what to include. They consider history, artistic influence, cultural significance, quality, representation, research, collections, and the relationship between different works. This means museums help shape our understanding of art history. But museums are not the only authority. Critics also play a role. For centuries, critics have written about artists and movements. They can introduce an artist to a larger audience. They can challenge an established reputation. They can influence collectors. They can create conversations. But critics can also be wrong. History has proven this many times. Artists who were dismissed during their lifetime can later become highly respected. And artists who were celebrated at one time can later become less important. So perhaps nobody has perfect judgment. Now let's talk about collectors. Collectors have enormous influence because they put money behind their opinions. When a collector spends a large amount of money on an artist, other people may pay attention. Perhaps another collector thinks, "If they are buying this artist, maybe I should look more carefully." Demand can increase. Prices can rise. The artist becomes more visible. And suddenly the market begins to reinforce the artist's reputation. But this creates an interesting question. Does expensive art become important because it is good? Or does it become expensive because people believe it is important? Sometimes those two things support each other, but they are not necessarily the same. This is why the art market can be confusing. Price is not the same as quality. A painting worth millions is not automatically better than a painting worth $500. And a painting worth $500 is not automatically less meaningful. Money measures market demand. It doesn't perfectly measure artistic quality. Now let's bring the most important person into the conversation. You, the viewer. When you stand in front of a painting, you bring your own experiences, your memories, your culture, your age, your emotions, your personal taste, your knowledge. All of these things influence what you see. Two people can look at exactly the same painting and experience completely different things. One person sees beauty, another sees sadness, another sees nothing special, another becomes deeply emotional. Which person is correct? perhaps all of them, because art is not only something the artist creates. It is also something the viewer experiences, and that experience matters. This is especially important when looking at contemporary art. Sometimes people feel embarrassed because they don't understand a work. They look around the gallery. Everyone seems serious. Someone is reading the museum label. Another person is nodding thoughtfully, and the viewer thinks, maybe I'm the only one who doesn't understand this. But you don't need to pretend. If you don't understand something, ask questions. Why was it created? What was happening when it was made? What is the artist trying to communicate? Why did the museum choose to display it? What do other people see? Understanding doesn't require pretending. Curiosity is enough, and you are allowed to dislike something after understanding it. In fact, that's a healthy relationship with art. You don't have to accept the opinion of the museum. You don't have to agree with the critic. You don't have to like what collectors are buying. You can say, I understand why this is historically important, but it isn't for me. That's a perfectly reasonable response. Now let's think about beauty. For a long time, beauty was one of the most important standards in Western art. Artists were trained to create ideal proportions, beautiful landscapes, elegant portraits, harmonious compositions. But modern art challenged many of those ideas. Artists began asking, does art have to be beautiful? Can ugliness be meaningful? Can ordinary objects become art? Can an idea be more important than craftsmanship? Can art make people uncomfortable? Can art ask a question without providing an answer? These questions changed the art world, and they continue to influence artists today. So perhaps the question isn't, what makes good art? Perhaps there are several questions. Is it technically strong? Is it original? Is it emotionally powerful? Does it communicate an idea? Does it challenge expectations? Does it influence other artists? Does it tell us something about its time? Does it make us think? Does it stay in our memory? Different artworks can succeed in completely different ways. A technically brilliant portrait may move us because it captures someone's personality. A simple abstract painting may affect us through color and rhythm. A disturbing artwork may force us to confront an uncomfortable subject. A quiet landscape may give us a moment of peace. They don't need to accomplish the same thing. And perhaps that's the most important lesson. Good art doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be famous. It doesn't have to be approved by a museum. And it doesn't have to be liked by everyone. Sometimes good art simply creates a meaningful experience. It makes you stop. It makes you feel. It makes you think. It makes you question something. Or perhaps it makes you see something familiar in a completely different way. So who decides what is good art? The truth is, no single person does. Artists influence the conversation. Museums influence it. Curators influence it. Critics influence it. Collectors influence it. History influences it. And audiences influence it. But ultimately, when you stand alone in front of a painting, you have your own response. You don't need permission to have it. You don't need to pretend. You don't need to like something because someone says it is important. Look closely. Think about it. Learn its story. And then decide what it means to you. Because perhaps the most interesting thing about art is not that everyone agrees. It is that one painting can make 100 people feel 100 different things. And that conversation may be part of what makes the artwork worth looking at. This is the gallery experience.